Oh, comics. Welcome back to This Week in Comics. I just wanted to mention, it's pretty funny that I keep saying This Week in Comics, and none of what I'm covering is regarding This Week in Comics. I don't know. I think it's kind of funny. Anyways, today I wanted to cover the Massiveverse and the characters within it and my thoughts and feelings on the matter. So, without further ado, the Massiveverse is the relaunched Image universe that started in 2021 with Radiant Black by Kyle Higgins and Marco Costa. The first 12 issues of the book were so popular that it led to them making a crossover book called Supermassive, which debuted the two new characters they were going to introduce into this Supermassive universe. That was Rogue Sun and Inferno Girl Red. Rogue Sun became an ongoing series that is still going to this day, and Inferno Girl Red was a 3-issue limited series that was released as a sort of trade paperback recently as well. Other characters that have been started within that universe as well as Radiant Red, No One, and Dead Lucky. Dead Lucky is an ongoing series. No One was a limited series, as well as Radiant Red being a limited series. And they also released a Radiant Pink limited series, now that I think of it too. In 2014, Kyle Higgins also wrote Cowl, the Chicago Organized Worker League, which has been retroactively introduced into the continuity as well. And the concept is being resurrected this August as a sort of precursor or a prequel. They're doing Cowl 1964. I haven't entirely looked into what that will be, but I imagine it's just going to be looking into Cowl in the 1964 era. So we'll see about that. Every year since 2022, Image has released a supermassive crossover book, one for the year. In this year's book, it will be coming out in 2 weeks, and it's going to serve as a way to clarify exactly how it is the Catalyst War that's taking place in the Radiant Black series is going to affect the greater line of comics. Also, there's been a lot of discussion online as to how Spawn fits into this new universe. At the end of the 2023 Supermassive book, Medieval Spawn made an appearance, and so people have been kind of wondering exactly what that means. It at least suggests that the universes are connected, although I don't believe that they're coexisting within the same universe, and that's just simply because since 2021, Spawn started the whole Spawn Universe thing with the book Spawn Universe, and now the whole line, they're all labeled in the last year on the Spawn books, it says New Universe. So I'm guessing that the Spawn books are existing in their own world. So now let's take a deeper look at two of the series which I've been keeping up with. And first, I want to go into exactly what's taking place in the series so as to give people a kind of rundown, and then at the end I'll give a wrap-up as to my feelings as to what's going on with these series. The series, Radiant Black. So this story follows Nathan Burnett and his old best friend Marshall, who he is reconnecting with at the beginning of the book and then throughout the series. Nathan is returning home to Chicago from LA after having run out of money to support his writing career. When he gets home, he goes out to drink with Marshall, and when they're stumbling drunk to their car afterward, which is a bit questionable, they see a black hole, a small black hole, hovering over the train tracks across the street. So they go to investigate, and Nathan touches it, and he transforms into Radiant Black, the superhero. His time as Radiant Black is short-lived, unfortunately, and that's because he gets into a fight with one of the other Radiants, and there's 4 of them, red, pink, and yellow. And he and Radiant Red get into a fight, and in the process, a building collapses on Nathan, which puts him in a coma. After this, Marshall takes up the mantle, and then he begins to fight alongside the other Radiants after trying to get revenge for Red, but they have to put aside their differences to fight these cosmic forces which are coming into play, and that's because their powers are cosmically related. After being asleep for a year, Marshall, he rescues Nathan from existence, bringing him back. And so the radiant powers are given to the folks by these godlike robot things, which are located in a other dimension known as existence. And while Marshall is fighting all these people while Nathan is asleep, he is seeing a ghost of Nathan all the time. And at first he kind of thinks it's his guilt that's haunting him, but then he realizes that Nathan is still alive and that part of him is just trapped in existence. After his fight with Radiant Red, he overexerted himself and somehow part of him got kind of detached, and now it's lost in that strange place called existence. And so Marshall, he goes to existence through the Radiant, and he goes and finds his friend's soul or whatever it is and brings him back to life, and then he comes back to the real world 6 weeks after Nathan is woken up, which is a little bit of a strange thing as to what's going on there. And after that, the friends share the power and fight the various threats they're facing. That is until the Catalyst War. And at this point, one of the giant robots, their giant robot who's given them their powers tells them that only one of them can be Radiant Black moving forward.
There can be only one.
And that's in issue number 25, and that's how it ends. Then in issue number 26, something very interesting story-wise happens, and it's incredibly unique. So, starting with issue 26, there's an issue 26 and a 26.5. One of the stories, and they're two separate stories, existing along two timelines. One of them is following if Nathan becomes Radiant Black, whereas the other one follows as if Marshall becomes Radiant Black. And then that's been ongoing up to this point, which is going to conclude in September with issue 30 and 30.5. And at that point, only one of them is going to be Radiant Black moving forward. And in the last issue that came out, 29 and 29.5, it seems as though it's not even going to be like, oh, we just followed the timeline we want. It seems as though the timelines are somehow going to be merged together, and we're going to get either the best of both or the worst of both or a mixture. And so it's just a really interesting storytelling technique that I haven't really seen take place in comic books before. Rogue Sun. In the first Supermassive book, we're introduced to Rogue Sun, who's a sort of magical knight that has fire powers. In the opening of the series, Rogue Sun is Marcus Bell, and he's been Rogue Sun for a good number of years. But in that first book, he's killed by a mysterious dark magician, and then the Sunstone, which contains the powers, is passed on to his son, who is from his past marriage that he abandoned. And this son really hates his dad, but unfortunately, his dad appears in ghost form whenever he becomes Rogue Sun, and it's something that apparently happens throughout for all the Rogue Sons, and it's that the spirit of the previous Rogue Sun becomes their mentor. And this is very much to his son, Dylan's, displeasure. So Marcus tries to train his son better to use his powers throughout the series, but Dylan really could just care less. And throughout the series, we get a lot of uncomfortable dialogue between a father with high expectations and a son who is just very inconsiderate of others and selfish. And Dylan's arrogance and lack of skill kind of make every conflict in this story that takes place much worse. In one of the last arcs, an older Rogue Sun took control of Dylan's body and released almost every one of the monsters that Marcus had trapped during his time as Rogue Sun. But eventually Dylan and Marcus are able to regain control. in that time, we got a glimpse into the source of the Rogue Sun's power, the Sunstone, which holds on to the spirits of the past Rogue Suns within it in a sort of heaven-like or paradise kind of area that these people exist in. But at the same time, they're all a bunch of grumpy old men. So it makes for a little bit of a fun time. This story also has played around with some interesting storytelling techniques. For example, issue 19 was a reversible issue. And so when you read through one side, it was the story taking place through Dylan's perspective. And then if you read through the other way, it was the same story taking place through Marcus's perspective. And that these two people, they're arguing with each other a lot. And you're just getting exactly how they feel throughout the situation. And it gives you a good understanding as to the dynamic at play here. The last major arc concluded with issue 18. And it seems since then that the story is going to be in a sort of holding pattern. That is until Catalyst War wraps up with Radiant Black. Because, as I said, with the new Supermassive book that's coming out, it seems as though Catalyst War is going to have some overarching effects on all the titles within the Supermassive universe. Alright, my opinions. As a comic book junkie, I'm always excited by the idea of new characters and a large interconnected storytelling that spans across multiple series. Unfortunately, this one isn't really sitting well with me, and hasn't been for a while. I love the powers that these heroes have, as well as the worlds that are kind of being built up around them, all the lore that's being added in, whether it's the existence part of the Radiant Black comics, or the little Sunstone world for Rogue Sun. It's all a bunch of very interesting stuff, and cool worlds that I would definitely love to spend some time in. Unfortunately, what's not working for me are the characters, most of which don't really strike me as being heroes, and even then, not really as good people. So, in the case of Radiant Black, Nathan is seemingly failing at pretty much all of his life, and it's landed him back at his parents' place, which I have no judgment for in that regard. But the thing is, at one point in the book, his father is talking to him about, finding another job, because obviously the writing thing didn't work out, and Nathan just, in the story, it's even written that it's like, oh, my father, what a terrible guy kind of thing, and just personally, I can't relate to this. His father's making a very reasonable suggestion of like, hey man, you don't have a paying job. That's a really good idea for people to have. In fact, you need it to survive. And he just acts like an immature child for even suggesting that he finds a paying job. And it just, not something that sits well with me. And similar in Rogue Sun, Dylan literally is a bully. Like, there are scenes of him bullying people in school. And he just treats everybody, his parents, his other family members, his friends, all of them like garbage. It's just not like a very endearing character. And regardless of how many problems he's causing, he never learns or even accepts responsibility for that. In fact, over the course of the last arc, over the course of the series, he just seems to get a lot more full of himself, even though he has no reason to be. And in the last arc, Dylan, he banished his dad from being his mentor ghost thing, and as a result, another Rogue Son took that place, who was an older Rogue Son. And him banishing his dad was much to like a lot of people tell him, no, you shouldn't do that, dude. Not the best idea. But anyway, he does it. And now this new Rogue Son, Dylan, gets himself into a situation that he can't get himself out of as Rogue Son, and he's about to like get killed. And so the old Rogue Son says, let me take control of your body, and I will make sure you don't die. And then takes care of the problem, but doesn't give the body back to Dylan, no doy. And then he goes on to cause a lot of problems. He's the one who releases all the monsters that Marcus caught. And after Marcus helps him to fix this problem, in the next issue, or in issue 20, one of the last ones that came out, Dylan, he's talking to the person who was holding the monsters, and he's like, oh yeah, sorry about the monsters getting released, but, it wasn't really my fault, it was that other guy. Like, dude, what? No, it was all you. Like, it was completely you. Oh, it's just, but still, everything works out for Dylan. He always saves the day. He's gonna get the girl, and honestly, I don't want it to. I hate the guy. It's, it's just not a good thing if he's the protagonist. So I could go through all the characters in these series, and it would just get rather redundant. And it's basically, the thing is, I think that these books are suffering the same problem that Marvel and DC books often do, which is that the writers are writing themselves into the story, and then adjusting the plot around what they want to happen versus what would make sense or what would be reflective of objective reality, in a sense, meaning like a world that we understand. Because certainly superheroes don't exist in this world, but that doesn't mean that people just start to act stupid, or not to act like people. And honestly, if this was reflective of that, I think these heroes would already be dead, or at the very least like destitute and alone and have nobody supporting them and helping them, which is the main reason why they're accomplishing their goals, is because they have other people around them helping them. They're not doing this all by themselves. And it's just that their decisions are so short-sighted and selfish, and like I said, they're not very likable people, and they're just not heroes. Like, throughout the book, Nathan, he does these things, it's multiple times where it's like, man, like you could fix your situation right now, like it could all be over, but he just continues to do it. And so I don't know, I'm not a big fan of these books, unfortunately, and I'm 29 books deep into Radiant Black, 20 books deep into Rogue Sun, so it certainly is a bit of a disappointment, but I'm really contemplating not continuing these books and kind of just giving up on the Super Massiveverse altogether, just because I don't think that these are good stories. And not only that, I wouldn't want to share these with the future generation, really. They were fun and exciting for what they were, but they're not timeless stories. They're very much, it seems as though, what we're getting. And in fact, in the back of Rogue Sun, Ryan Parrott, the author, he says that this book is kind of a reflection of his relationship with his father. So very clearly, he's writing himself into the story. He's writing his own stuff into it. And I really feel that's the case with Kyle Higgins, especially because the story is centered around a writer. And the main character is a writer. Kyle Higgins is a writer. It's very similar to what Stephen King does, in that a lot of his main characters are writers. And a lot of the main characters are reflective of him. They are versions of him in one way or another, and he tweaks various elements here and there. So it's not that every character is the same exact person, but they're all versions of him. And so I don't really have an issue with it when Stephen King does it. And that's because he does a good job of actually building up a realistic story and not treating himself like somebody like Dylan or like Nathan, where everything works out for them. In his stories, things go terribly for people. In fact, sometimes the main character just gets his arm cut off or dies, like various things. That's much more reflective of reality, in that, if you're going to go through hard times and make bad decisions, sometimes bad things are going to happen to you. And certainly there was Nathan falling into a coma, but that was more seen as like he did the right thing, and because of that he got hurt, which is just, in reality, when he does the wrong thing, he should get hurt. So yeah, as I said, I'm not sure I'm going to continue reading these books, which is just a really big shame because I've invested a lot into them up to this point. But such is the case, and aside from that, I've talked about in the past, I want to cover the Ghost Machine comics. I've already covered the Rippaverse comics, and then there's also the Spawn universe. These are all things which are really exciting to me. And not only that, there's independent books which are coming out that I really like William of Newbury. That's one I would definitely share with the younger generation, which I think is very rare in comics these days, so worth buying, if simply just for that matter. And then there's other ones like Falling in Love on the Path to Hell, which pretty interesting up to this point. We'll see if it holds up, but yeah, a lot of other things going on. It's just a shame to see that this whole relaunched Image universe is kind of falling flat, at least in my opinion. But such happens. Aside from that, thanks for checking in. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.